The year is 479 BC. On a beach near Salamis, the tide is washing away charcoal and broken wood. The air smells of salt and smoke. The Persian fleet is gone, defeated. Greece has won. That is what the poets will tell you. That is what they will carve into marble statues for the next 2,000 years. But right now, on this beach, there's a sound coming from the hills that no epic poem will ever mention. Screaming. Not the battle cry of soldiers, not the adrenaline of combat, but the high-pitched raw terror of women who realize that no one is coming to save them. It is coming from a tent city that stretches for miles along the coast. Inside those tents are the spoils of war, not gold, not silver, but women, daughters of Athens, wives of Corinth, mothers of Thebes, women who watched their cities burn, women who hid their children in wells and cisterns, praying they would suffocate quietly rather than be found. They thought the worst thing that could happen was death. They were wrong, because they are still alive. What Xerxes and his commanders did to them in the months that followed wasn't just cruelty, it was a system. Our history books prefer to translate it as enslavement. But that word is too soft. What happened to these women, documented in Persian administrative tablets and traced in the bones found in mass graves near Sardis, was an erasure. A calculated, systematic attempt to delete a nation from the inside out. The question isn't whether you can stomach the truth. It's whether you are willing to remember what they endured while the rest of the world celebrated Greek victory. If you have ever wondered why history is told through the lens of men on battlefields and not the women left behind in the ruins, you are in the right place. Welcome to the Scarlet Archives. Before we go further, if you are drawn to the documented records that Hollywood refuses to touch, subscribing helps us uncover more accounts like this. Now, let's go back to the coastline. Xerxes. I was not just a king. He was the living embodiment of an empire that stretched from the Indus to the Aegean. He didn't conquer through brute force alone. He conquered through a system so efficient, it functioned like a second government. History calls it the harem. But that word is misleading. It wasn't about pleasure. It wasn't about silk cushions and fantasies. It was about control. It was about taking the daughters of your enemies and turning them into symbols of submission. It was about breeding the next generation of administrators who owed loyalty to Persia, not to the lands their mothers came from. When Xerxes invaded Greece in 480 BC, he brought 500,000 men, but he also brought scribes, bureaucrats, men whose job wasn't to fight, but to catalog. They documented everything, who lived, who died, and most importantly, who could be taken. The girls were the priority. By the time the Persian army retreated after the battles of Salamis and Plataea, over 40,000 Greek women and children had been absorbed into the Persian administrative network. 40,000. Most were shipped east to Sardis, Susa, and Persepolis. Some were placed in estates as domestic labor. Others, especially the young and the beautiful, the daughters of noble families, were taken into the royal system. Not for what you think, but for integration. Imagine the scene on the beach at Phaleron in the summer of 479 BC. The Persian general Artabazos is overseeing the harvest. The women are separated. Girls under 12 are sent to one group to be raised as servants, taught Persian, and integrated slowly until the Greek words for mother and home feel foreign on their tongues. Women over 30 are sent to labor camps in Thrace and Phrygia, where life expectancy is measured in seasons, not years. But the ones in between, the girls aged 13 to 25, are the ones Artabazos examines personally. A girl from Megara is pulled from the line. She is maybe 16. Her hair is matted with dust and salt. Her tunic is torn. She doesn't fight back because she has already learned what happens when you do. Her mother screams anyway. A soldier strikes her down, but he doesn't kill her. They need her alive to watch, because that is part of the system too. You don't just take the daughters, you make the mothers understand that resistance is pointless. The girl is led to a tent. Inside, there is a scribe seated at a low table with clay tablets. He doesn't look at her face. He looks at her teeth, her hands. He records her details: age, height, condition of teeth, presence of scars, evidence of virginity. She is no longer a person. She is inventory. An intact seal found in the ruins of Persepolis reads, "Delivered to Susa, 120 Greek females, sorted and prepared for royal service. Condition acceptable. Condition acceptable." That is how the Persian Empire saw the daughters of Hellas. From there, the nightmare truly began. They were put on ships. They were marched east. But they didn't go straight to the palace. They went to holding camps along the coast of Asia Minor. Why? Because the Persians knew that if you put a captive straight to work, she resists. She remembers home. She holds on to hope. But if you break her first, if you strip her of her name, her language, her sense of self, then she integrates. The most effective way to break someone isn't through violence. It is through humiliation. It is through forcing them to participate in their own erasure. There is an account preserved in a collection of Greek epitaphs. A woman named Cleis from Corinth. She was 13 when the Persians took her. She survived. Decades later, she returned to Greece as an old woman and left an inscription at a temple near Olympia. It reads, "I was Cleis, daughter of Nicodemus. They took me in the year of the fire. They gave me a new name. I will not speak it. I served in the house of the king's cousin for 16 years. When they freed me, I had forgotten the hymns my mother taught me. I have come here to remember. This stone will remember for me." She was 29 when she was freed, and she had forgotten the hymns. That isn't enslavement. That is cultural annihilation. The camps where these women were held were re-education centers. Those who resisted were starved. Those who complied were rewarded. And those who resisted too much? In 1958, archaeologists excavated a mass grave near Sardis. They found the remains of over 300 women dated to the early 5th century BC. The bones showed signs of malnutrition and blunt force trauma. But the archaeologists noted something strange. Almost all of the skulls were facing west, as if even in death they were trying to look toward home. By late 479 BC, the first wave of survivors reached Susa, the administrative heart of the empire. To a girl from a Greek village, the city must have looked like another planet. Columned halls stretching higher than any temple in Athens. Gardens blooming with flowers that had no Greek names. The air smelling of incense and cardamom. And in the center of it all, the palace. This is where they entered the Royal Harem. But forget the Hollywood images. The Persian harem was a political institution. The goal was integration. The women selected were there to bear children, children who would have Persian fathers, children who would be raised Persian, but with enough Greek blood to serve as intermediaries in the newly conquered territories. It was genetic colonialism. We know this because we have their letters. A letter preserved in the dry sands of Bactria, translated in the 1970s, tells the story of a woman named Roxane. She wrote to her sister back in Thessaly around 470 BC. She writes, "I am well. I have learned the language. I have learned the prayers. The king's steward has taken me as a secondary wife. I have given him a son. He is beautiful. He has your eyes, but he will never know your name. Please do not try to find me. I am not who I was." That sentence should haunt you. I am not who I was. Roxane survived. She was fed. She was clothed. She was elevated in status. But in exchange, she gave birth to a son who would grow up serving the empire that destroyed his mother's home. This was the true strategy, not massacre. Massacre creates martyrs, but assimilation erases you, and it worked. By the mid-5th century BC, there were thousands of mixed Greek-Persian children serving in the Achaemenid administration. Xerxes didn't just invade Greece, he absorbed it. But what about the women who came back? In the decades after the war, as Persia's grip weakened, a trickle of women began returning home, freed by sympathetic owners or ransomed by families. But when they came home, they found that home didn't exist anymore. An inscription from the city of Eretria tells the story of a woman named Harmonia. She returned after 12 years in captivity. She brought with her a child, a boy, half Persian, maybe 6 years old. The city refused to recognize her citizenship. Her family refused to take her in. The reason is recorded bluntly in the city's legal archives. Defiled by barbarian touch. To accept her would be to accept the enemy. To look at her child was to be reminded of their humiliation. So Harmonia and her son were turned away. The inscription ends there. We don't know what happened to them. This is the part of the story that doesn't fit the heroic narrative. Greece won the war. Athens became the heart of democracy. But no one wanted to talk about the daughters who came back broken, or the ones who never came back at all. They became the silent women, shadows moving through the agora. Herodotus mentions them in a single line. Many were taken and some returned. That is all the history books gave them. But the graves don't lie. Near Thebes, archaeologists found the grave of a young woman in her early 20s. Beside her skeleton was a small clay tablet inscribed in Greek. It reads, "I am daughter of no one. I am mother of no one. I am the forgotten. Let this mark that I was." No name, just that. Why does this story matter? Because it reminds us that victory has a cost. We celebrate the Battle of Salamis. We build statues to the generals. But the price of that war was paid by the women who were erased. Xerxes lost the war for the land, but he succeeded in stealing a generation. Empires don't just conquer territory, they conquer bloodlines, they conquer memories. And 2,500 years later, we are still finding the evidence. We are reading the tablets. We are translating the letters. We are refusing to let them be forgotten. The 300 Spartans died standing up. The daughters of Hellas died slowly in silence, thousands of miles from home. But today we break that silence. If stories like this remind you how fragile humanity is, and how easily voices can be erased, subscribe to the Scarlet Archives, because the past isn't dead. It's just waiting for someone to listen.